Welcome ladies, gentlemen and others. My name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and when it comes to video games, the RWBY series has certainly dipped its toes into a variety of genre puddles over the years. We've seen Team RWBY and company try out some 4-player hacking and slashing, tower defending, card collecting, crystal matching, a couple of times guest starring in other games, and of course, we can't forget about some good old-fashioned fisticuffs. But aside from BlazBlue Cross-Tag Battle and the taken from us far too soon Amity Arena, most RWBY fans would agree while the genre pool has been deep, the level of quality has been kinda shallow to say the least. So, when it was announced back at RTX 2020 that a new RWBY game, RWBY Arrowfell, was on the way, hope started to bubble in the fans once more that perhaps this could be the one to finally be the series' first truly great gaming venture. A lot of this early hope came from two key elements. Firstly, the story was going to be truly canonical, taking place during a specific bubble of time in Volume 7, unlike past games which either had no plot at all or were wafer thin in terms of its canon impact. Getting to play a small piece of the actual series narrative certainly sounded tasty, especially for all of us right now who are chomping at the bit for any kind of new story content after going dry for about 2 years now. And then we have the other big source of promise, the names behind the game, Wayforward and Arc System Works. Now, the latter has had history with RWBY before, through BB Tag, so having them on board built some kind of faith amongst the fans that this game was going to be in good hands when it comes to how faithful it captures the series on a transition from the web show to video game technical level. As for Wayforward, they're a massive name in the indie game crowd, having previously made games for Capcom, Nintendo, and Disney, with their biggest hits being their River City games and of course the Shantae series, their charming 2D Metroidvania franchise which Arrowfell would be taking inspiration from, combining the high action and colourful world of RWBY with the classic platforming and puzzle solving fun of Wayforward's staple IP, for what could very well be the winning formula to finally crack the RWBY video game code. Personally, my only experience with Wayforward that wasn't WWF Betrayal and Metroidvanias as a whole is with DuckTales Remastered back in 2013 and Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, which I recently beat in anticipation for Arrowfell's release. And I could already see how the mixture of tight platforming exploration, a focus on effective skill use, and the strong character writing could work when you slap the RWBY meat to the skeleton. So at least for me, I was feeling relatively confident that this combo would bode well. And for the record, I should note that I was fortunate to be given an early access code for the game by the folks at Wayforward, which I deeply appreciate. But I promise you, this won't sway my review. These are still going to be my unbiased feelings on the game, so don't worry about that. And I'm also playing this on the PS5, though it's also out for every other current major console and PC. So, does this latest digital adventure finally give RWBY fans the quality gaming content that we've been begging for? Or does Arrowfell fail to hit bullseye? Without any further ado, I'm ready to go, so game start! Let's begin with talking about the story, and without going into spoilers since it's a new game best experienced firsthand. Again, this is taking place shortly after Team RWBY received their full Huntress licenses in Volume 7 and the gang took up missions alongside the Kingdom's military. After coming across a legally distinct pocket-sized ball meant for monsters, or in this case, an orb that's attracting Grim with stored negative emotions, the team are tasked with finding out the device's origin, which will take them from the bright lights of Atlas to the bleak streets of Mantle, as well as the many new landmarks, caves, and villages in the frosty tundra outside the city's walls. Along the way, the gang will also get help from some returning fan favourites, and naturally, the gang's search will also lead them not just to answers, but a deeper plot, and a host of people opposing them, like the new kids on the block, Team Briar, featuring Bianca, the cool and duty-driven leader, Ivy, the harsh one with the rather unfortunate last name, Rowan, who might give Yang a run for her money when it comes to looking cool with a literal hothead, and Ruda, aka the best girl on the team. Now, for what probably would have been about a brief 2 to 3 episode mini arc in the show itself, this is a fine enough story that accomplishes what it set out to do most: give us a light reason to explore more of Atlas and see the girls be tested after their new promotion, ahead of the real challenges soon to follow. Granted, the mystery to it isn't that deep, and most of its surprises are kinda easy to figure out quite quickly, plus all in all, it doesn't really have a lot of the long-term ripple effects on the rest of the Atlas arc, as it's somewhat small, but I do appreciate the efforts made to give us something that does play with the narrative hooks present in the volume at that time, like the military's troubled history in its efforts to protect the kingdom and the world, the lengths that people will go to at times to gain power, and even smaller things like how Mantle's suffering, the Faunus, and especially trust can get manipulated by those with large goals. These are all brief plot elements in a rather short story, I must stress, and you'll likely beat it within about 4-ish hours if you're not focused on 100% completion, but it's still effective despite some of its shortcomings, like the lack of depth or its surface level conflict. Like many a game of its ilk, the story is mostly just there to be the supplementary flavoring attached to the core material that is the gameplay. But this story does still feel right at home in the canon, which as a fan is a welcome sight. And while newbies to the series might not fully grasp every bit of the deeper context or references, it's still an easy enough plot to follow, so you shouldn't have to fret about being totally confused by the world that you're experiencing as you play. The story's biggest strength does come in its writing. Characters all speak true to how they are in the show, regardless of the tone, and it furthers the validity of this being a small piece of the main show's puzzle, minus a few times where Weiss's cutting jabs are a bit too harsh and more akin to her early show Ice Queen days, and RWBY can act a bit naive at times, which is a little bit awkward given her role in Volume 7's major decisions. But beyond that, RWBY's enthusiastic kindness, Weiss's prim sense of responsibility, Blake's sincere earnestness, and Yang's passionate toughness are all present across the many text box chatter and fully animated cutscenes, with the funny dialogue and moments where the story does take the matter seriously being well balanced across the board. Intermixed with the overarching plot, players will often be led on small fetch quests, and the dialogue here is where most of the fun interactions can be found. There's also some rather charming interactions with the many original NPCs dotted across the kingdom, with those involved in side quests in particular offering fun personalities and neat motivations that give their tasks some more memorability, enticing you further into helping them just to hear what they have to say next. Heck, even after I finished their quest, I often found myself coming back to them to hear what new stuff they had to say as the story has been playing out. My personal standouts being Russet and his XXL rear, and the cute mouse faunus Mikado. The new major phases, mind you, do suffer from the game's short narrative, allowing little time for them to truly flesh out to a satisfying enough degree. Especially Team Briar, sad as it is to say, who do feel a little undercooked despite them being set up as the main rivals to our leading ladies. A few more interactions with them would have helped strengthen the game's effort to have them serve as some intriguing parallel introspection with our heroes, but beyond their solid first impression and the small amount of characterization they get towards the end, they and the rest of the new Major Blood could have done with some more legroom to make a bigger impact. Also, and this is a brief spoiler, so click to this time on the screen if you want to jump to the next section, but yeah, it's kinda weird there's absolutely no mention at all of Jean, Ren, Nora, or Oscar. The remnants of our beloved B-team and everyone's favourite farm boy are noticeable absentees throughout the game, with no one referring to them in the slightest to even explain their absence, which is quite surprising considering they're all major characters at this point. It's possible that they might be being saved for a potential DLC side story down the line, but with Wayforward themselves saying that no DLC has been planned as of yet, it only increases the oddity that these massively loved fan favourites are left on the bench without so much as a single line of dialogue explaining where they are or even mentioning them in relation to something else. In the grand scheme of things, the story gets by fine enough without them, but at least something would be much better than the game seemingly going out of their way to act like they're not even a thing in the first place. Now we get to the real meat of this game, and that is indeed Arrowfell's gameplay. Across multiple levels, you'll be using each of the 4 girls to fight enemies, solve puzzles, and complete quests through keen use of their skills and platforming. You'll be able to control all of Team RWBY at the same time, swapping between them with either the shoulder buttons or their corresponding direction on the right analog stick. Meanwhile, you use the face buttons to melee attack, jump, shoot your gun, or use your selected character's semblance skill. RWBY gives you a speed dash that covers long distances and can give you a brief invulnerability state. Weiss creates a glyph that you can use as a platform before it switches to a wide-reaching icicle burst. And then there's Blake, whose shadow clone can copy your current controlled character's melee attacks and is also handy for switch puzzles. And then Yang can break rocks and slam the ground hard for big damage. As for your defensive capabilities, there is no dodge button or block button, so you have to maneuver yourself well to avoid hits that will decrease your energy bar. If you get hit again when the bar is empty, you'll lose a heart. And of course, if you lose them all, it's mission failed, though thankfully you do go back to your last save point. Admittedly, I didn't know about this at first cause the health system wasn't explained before I lost my first heart, which is a bit annoying, but thankfully you do naturally recover a portion of your energy over time, and you can find health orbs and hearts in destructible environments or from defeated enemies, and save points will heal you completely upon use. One interesting detail though that has its positives and negatives is your ranged fire is also tied to your energy meter. And on one hand, I kinda like it. While it doesn't exactly make sense in terms of the series, since the bar acts like aura and now that gives you an additional protection before you're left vulnerable, and semblances drain aura not guns, I can understand the change given it would be a major pain having to waste time and items to refill your bar whilst trying to use your semblances for a puzzle. Plus, this creates a decent risk versus reward challenge, as ranged shots deal good damage, but against small or fast enemies, they're more likely to miss, so make every shot count lest you be left open to losing a heart. On the other hand, this also rather scared me off using ranged fire as much as I would melee attacks, because this game will challenge you thanks to the abundance of enemies that can be on screen. Some of which can hit like a truck, taking up a good chunk of your meter, and enemies also have contact damage. Many will charge at you as well, resulting in you losing a lot of health before you're even ready to fight back. So regardless of how you're fighting, both short and long range, you're ultimately going to be leading to a lot of instances where you're losing energy that you're going to need to keep a constant eye on if you're trying to survive, especially with your health being shared across all the girls. I think it would have been better if the game had a separate ammo count for ranged fire, leaving the meter strictly for just your health, and that we also had a button for a quick block or dodge that still chips a little of your health upon contact. That way you can get up close and personal and prepare for charging foes, just with a small drawback to avoid spamming. That way the action keeps flowing nice and smooth and the overall combat would be much better balanced. Thankfully, you can upgrade your health via permanent hearts that you buy from the merchant, who sadly isn't the best shopkeep in winter gear, but hey, he's still cool. You'll come across him at various locations in the game with different stock lists at each of them, and beyond the previously mentioned extra hearts and one-use health items, there's also skill points. You will definitely need to use these to buff up the girl's attack, defense, energy recovery, and ranged attack stats, and don't worry, there are enough of them in the game to max them all out, but you'll have to find them first, either via the merchant or in chests scattered throughout the levels. It's then up to you to decide who gets what depending on your preference. Do you want to go all the way with a Wrecking Ball Yang who can tank hits like a champ? Or do you want to balance out your points so everyone is on equal plane? The choice is yours, which is a smart way to encourage repeat playthroughs with different stats and drive up the incentive in exploring everything the maps have in store for that sense of accomplishment upon finding a new chest behind a hidden path or previously hard to pass roadblock. You'll eventually realize as well, each girl has their own strengths and weaknesses with their general moveset. In terms of melee range, RWBY is the standout, with a scythe's longer reach, while Weiss is definitely the best option when it comes to taking down airborne foes, thanks to the additional height and ranged fire her glyphs can provide. Yang also has the fastest melee strikes and the power to back it up, but the previously mentioned contact damage does leave her the most open, especially when you ground pound and it doesn't do enough damage to kill. And oddly, Blake's quicker slashes aim slightly down, leading to many a situation where I kept missing a flying enemy or even a hanging breakable, simply because Blake doesn't seem to aim straight forward like the rest of the team. In terms of my favourite to play as, it probably was RWBY, thanks to that great melee range and a semblance being handy whenever I felt myself getting swamped. Though by all means, you can get through this game fine enough regardless of who is your ace. That's probably because it is very easy to get OP as heck fairly early with the right stat boosts and doubling up attacks with Blake's semblance. Doubly so when you later upgrade to 2 clones, with each girl getting their own semblance upgrade as the game goes on. These are also your means of furthering level exploration, as in classic Metroidvania tradition, backtracking to previously explored levels with new skills is required to either collect items for side quests, continuing the story, or finding those elusive skill points. Discovering these roadblocks and hard to reach places are easy enough, but coming back to them might be a bit frustrating, as there is no in-level map, which I find a weird omission. You will be pointed to the right direction as to what levels have something for you to do, thanks to the world map having the location tagged with an exclamation mark. But getting back to where these sections are can be tricky if you don't remember them off the top of your head, which again would have been alleviated by having that map option, as well as a quest log so you know exactly which marker you need to follow to complete that chosen mission. In these levels, you'll also sometimes be locked into an ambush where you have to beat up all the foes in order to proceed, and I found these to be the better of the 2 skill-based challenges. The switch puzzles are rather simple, it shouldn't take longer than a minute at most. However, the ambushes can get pretty wild, keeping you on your toes in effective trials of your patience, maneuverability, and skill. Naturally, there's also boss fights that continue the thread of testing how well you can read enemy patterns and time your own attacks. And while these two can be swept aside in relative short order with the right OP strategy, there are some neat tactic plays where if you time the right semblance use, you'll either perfectly avoid attacks or create an opening to dish out your own offense without retaliation, the last 3 bosses in particular having the best examples of this. On a visual level, the game is delightful. Colors pop with vibrancy, animations are smooth with show-accurate effect work, and the Grim, both new and old, are awesome to see in action, especially one iconic beastie that I did not expect to see, and it looks as terrifying as ever. And many locations have lovely layered backdrops that feel ripped right out of the show or its concept art. And I'm especially happy to see that a good effort was done to not let the game's predominantly snowy based setting lead to boring and repetitive environments. Atlas looks truly pristine and high class compared to the more mechanical and drab Mantle streets. Settlements and military bases dot the background out in the tundra and caverns, and all of them cover different colors and motifs and lighting to make each of these caves feel distinct enough without much repeating beyond rocks and lanterns. There's even this awesome map select screen giving us our best look so far of the continent of Solitas, complete with all new locations with brand new names, something that I would love to see more of in RWBY in general. The models are also very pleasing to the eye too, marrying the show's 3D visuals with a slight chibi look closer to the Shantae game's style, allowing the cast to stand out well against the background. And their animations capture who they are, right down to their little idol poses and how they run, keeping the show's design flares strongly represented even in this new format. Cutscenes are also split between dialogue boxes with original 2D artwork or full 3D animations made in-house at Rooster Teeth, the latter of which is thankfully just as well made as the actual show's visuals, right down to the smallest of character quirks and expressions. I do wish it wasn't just Team RWBY though that got multiple 2D expressions, but props to the cool art nonetheless, and for making totally original art for some of the quest NPCs, giving them that additional colour to their material, making their interactions all the more entertaining. We of course also have the core voice cast returning, and even the supporting faces as well, for as brief as they appear, with new talents like Alexis Tipton, Amelie, Laura Stahl, and Judy Alice Lee joining the fold to great effect, though full voice work is only present in the 3D cutscenes. Everywhere else is just gameplay grunts and limited quips, which is a shame since that would further the cementation of this game's appeal as being the lost Volume 7 episodes, and all the cutscenes add up to a relatively short enough amount of dialogue that I personally think could have been done, but given this is often part of the course for indie games, it's not that surprising. And everyone, be they new or old, still does a stand-up job regardless of how much we actually do hear them. And what would a RWBY project be without some good music? The game's score is another highlight, as it maintains this series' staple of pulse-pounding rock and inviting atmospheric melodies, on par with that with the main show, which is especially notable as it's not done by the series' long-serving music team. Jeff and Casey only provide a new main vocal theme that's about as catchy and energetic as we've come to expect from the pair, and the team that does helm the game's music this time out do a bang-up job brewing a pleasing array of high-energy action tracks and delightful calmer pieces that, much like a lot in this game, feel right at home with what this series has done in the past to build its identity. My personal favourites would probably be the tracks for the chilled jazz in Atlas Heights, the ambush battle track, the comforting sounds of Essentown, as well as the cool tones of Mossick Grotto, and the pair of tracks during and after the Gehen train sequence. If I had to make any critical opinions on the music, I do think the vocals themselves were mixed in a way with the rest of the game that made it tough to hear what was actually being sung, most notably with the Teen Bryant introduction scene and some of the later game's vocal songs, which also had some auto-tune. Auto-tune in general is not particularly my cup of tea, but at the very least, by the time it was used for the last time in the game's final boss, I had grown accustomed to it, and in fact that boss song is actually pretty awesome. But yeah, that is probably the biggest gripe for me in terms of music, as good as it does still sound at times. Now, before I wrap up my final thoughts, here are some miscellaneous thoughts for anything that I couldn't fit elsewhere, including some tips. So, let's start with the fact that I think the ending maybe needed a little bit to connect back to the rest of Volume 7, as it does end rather abruptly. Maybe this could have been where we got Jean and the others popping in to explain where they were, and Team RWBY explains what they've been up to as a nice little bookend moment, but yeah, I guess that's what it is. A glossary section in the main menu would have also been neat for newcomers to the series to get more details on the characters, the world of Remnant, and other key terms of the overall series if they wanted some further insight. And in fact, it also would have been an easy way to add in additional information on the game's new characters to flesh them out beyond their limited bubble of time, perhaps as part of a collectible data logs quest to give players more reason to explore levels beyond skill point hunting and quest completion. Speaking of completion, it's disappointing that you don't get anything for beating the game even if you 100% it beyond your standard console trophies. Something like an art viewer, snippets from the show, or additional gameplay features like new difficulty modes or character skins would have been appreciated for that final positive feeling and incentive to play again beyond just using the different stat layouts. And I also did have one bug happen where I was soft locked after respawning, though thankfully that was the only instance I found of a glitch, and the game does still run smoothly for the rest of the playthrough. Tips wise, if you ever feel lost on what you need to do or you just need a reminder, go visit Maria in Pietro's pharmacy. She'll point you in the right direction. Also, as I stressed earlier, you should really speak to the NPCs as often as the story goes on. You'll get some additional insight on some of the new characters, the ongoing story events, or just some charming fluff that does make for some good bits of humor. When you start the game, I'd personally prioritize defense with your skill points. It'll get you through those early enemy swarms until you're familiar with the gameplay. This guy? Beat him up big time. He knows what he did. I'd only really spend Lien on health items if you absolutely feel the need to do so. Green orbs and hearts drop often enough, and you're better off saving Lien for the skill points, heart upgrades, and revive rings. And finally, take your time to learn attack patterns and cues if you're feeling overwhelmed. Every enemy has most of their attacks giving you some kind of tell about what they're gonna do, so memorize them, time your attacks, and you'll do fine. So, final thoughts. How do I feel? Well, RWBY Arrowfell is not without its flaws. It somehow manages to be surprisingly tough and yet easy at the same time. The story suffers from its short length, obvious twists, and not enough time with the most interesting parts of it, and there might not be enough present to satisfy those looking for a deep Metroidvania or those looking for enough reasons for them to finally check out RWBY proper. However, what Arrowfell does right, it does quite well indeed. The writing brings everything to what fans come to love about the series and its cast. The game looks and sounds top draw. Plus, as easy as it is to go OP, there is still that thrilling rush when it comes to overcoming tough enemy fights, exploring past level roadblocks, and raising your stats with newly obtained skill points. Most importantly of all though, the game gives RWBY fans a fresh new experience full of appreciated world building, great character dialogue, and a uniquely entertaining, immersive adventure that does truly feel like we're controlling a legit episode of the show. If you're blazing through to the end, or you're wanting to do everything possible, it'll do enough for a few sessions at most depending on your skill, and you'll probably still have a fun time. Plus, for RWBY fans like myself who perhaps aren't as experienced with these types of games, I would honestly go out and say it's actually an effective gateway entry into the action/puzzle platforming genre. I know me personally, I'm even more excited now to check out the rest of the Shantae games after being sold on the gameplay's appeal factors by this point. And for the price and game length it's currently at, which is about the same as the Shantae series, it's relatively fair for what it does give me. In my opinion, the best pure RWBY game that we've had. Again, it's not perfect, but like the series, it is able to achieve some great highs despite its flaws. There's still enough that left me feeling happy no matter the downsides, and I would absolutely love some DLC, as I do still see the potential that is left untapped in either more time with Team RWBY or some new fun with the likes of Team Juniper or Team Briar. In the end, I had a grand time as both a RWBY fan and a gamer in general, and when standing Arrowfell next to everything that's come before for the franchise, there's enough positives to support my belief that this was indeed a victory, not a game over. So that's my thoughts on RWBY Arrowfell. Again, big thank you to Wayforward for the code. I am truly thankful for that and this game. And don't forget that it's now out on all major consoles and PC. So, for those of you who have played the game, how about you tell me your feelings now in the comments down below? Were you happy by the end, or were you left wanting more? Which of the girls was your MVP? What kind of DLC would you like? And finally, what is the next RWBY game you want to see? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons, tick the notification box, and make sure you're following me for all of my social medias for updates on the channel and more. But until next time, have a good day or a good night, and peace out.